Southern Oregon may look like paradise, but what most people don't see until it's too late is just how different life here really is. From legit safety concerns to tight-knit communities that aren't always easy to break into, there are real lifestyle trade-offs that those fancy magazines don't really mention to you. But I'm gonna tell you all about those on this video right here. Hey, I'm Brian Simmons with the Buying Southern Oregon Real Estate Team, and I've helped dozens of families and retirees relocate here from all parts of the country the right way. And in this video, I'm gonna share the 10 brutally honest truths that you need to know before you make the move, because some of these might sound tough, but the reality is that there's some really good news, okay? They all have a solution if you know where to look. So let's go ahead and start out with the one thing that a lot of people moving here from out of the state are very surprised by, and that is, number one, that not all small towns are super duper friendly and welcoming. Tight-knit towns can just be slow to welcome newcomers, okay? And so if they know that you're from another state, namely one down to the south of us, they may not be the most welcoming, okay? That's what the rumor is, that's what people say. I don't know that that actually is true, and we'll talk about more in a second, but the reality is that there can be, in some communities, especially some of the smaller ones, a little bit of tension towards folks that are relocating here from out of town. They don't want you to come in here and California or Oregon, okay? And that's a real thing. People really do think that that's what's happening. My experience has been very different than that because I find that most folks that are relocating here are fleeing an area and wanting to come to Oregon because of what we have to offer here. So I've never seen many people come up here and want to impose their policies and the things that made them want to leave California. I don't see them coming here and wanting to bring those with them. So that's one thing to be aware of. It's a little bit more prevalent in Josephine County than Jackson County, but something to be aware of is that does exist and it can catch people off guard, okay? Another one there is the politics, religion, lifestyle differences are real, and they can affect your sense of belonging, right? So if you go into a small town that is historically very conservative and you are very progressive, you may not fit in, right? And that's something that is, maybe that's important to you, maybe it's not, but that's something that we could discuss and that I can always help you out with, okay? And so at the end of the day, that is kind of the big, surprise, is that you may feel like an outsider if you don't find the right community that you are going to be able to integrate into in the way that you would like. Like I said, though, there is good news and there's a solution to each one of these issues, right? And so the solution here is that I can help you choose an area that matches your personality and your pace and your values and the lifestyle that you want to live, right? So is privacy important to you? We have that. Do you want to be close to the golf course? We've got that. Near a specific high school or middle school? We've got that, right? Walking distance to a restaurant? No problem. Or in a community with people that are like-minded, okay? We can definitely find that too. So none of those would be an issue after the proper conversation to help me understand what it is that we're looking for. As a matter of fact, I actually created a video interviewing one of my clients who moved here, retired here from California, and we talked all about these exact issues, okay? About the politics, about being, labeled as a Californian in Oregon. Did you need to change your license plates immediately? And instead of me telling you, I think it would be great for you to see this video. I'll put a link to it in the description of this video, and I'll actually put a little preview of it at the very, very end of this one, where you can go ahead and you can listen straight from the horse's mouth. I actually have two separate interviews just like that I've done of folks that have moved to Southern Oregon from California. You can check out both of those on this channel and you hear directly from them what their experience has been like living here in Southern Oregon, okay? So go ahead and check those out after this one. Number two is going to be that you will most likely drive everywhere for everything, okay? And that's because public transit is nearly non-existent. We do have it. There's Jackson County, there's public transportation, buses and those sorts of things, but from what I've heard, I've never been on them, but from what I've heard, the routes aren't as timely and those sorts of things. So anyways, try it. Maybe you've had different experiences. If you have, leave that down in the comment section. I'd love to have some input on that. But from what I understand, the public transit system here in Southern Oregon leaves something to be desired. So if that's something that you would rely on, make sure you definitely do your research there, okay? The reality though is that running just your normal daily errands, obviously depending on where you live in proximity to the grocery stores and stuff, but it's not unusual for that to be, 20 to 40 minutes round trip, right? I live in the town of Rogue River, and if I want to go into Grants Pass and back, that's gonna be, 20, 30 minutes round trip depending on where I'm going. So that's something that is, just important to be aware of. You want to run down to the grocery store to do a big shop or whatever, or you need to go to Home Depot to pick up some supplies for a project. You need to be able to expect, that, and just be aware of what the drive time might be based on obviously your proximity to those locations. Gas stations, grocery stores, and just the various services are a little bit more sparse in some of the rural areas, okay? It's never an issue. It's never like you can't get fuel if you need it. But it's something that if you're expecting like a lot of choice in some of these more rural areas, you may not find that, okay? You might have, the gas station in your town if you're in one of the smaller places rather than being, 4 different Chevrons or something in your town that maybe you're used to. So again, something to be aware of. And the last one on that is just that the ride share services like Uber and Lyft are not the most reliable here in Southern Oregon. So again, if that's something that you utilize a lot, you will be unpleasantly surprised with what you're going to see here in those. You still get them, they still do exist, but if you're thinking that you're just going to hop on your phone and get an Uber and it's going to be there in 3 minutes, not likely. But again, there is a solution here, and that's essentially just gaining an understanding of what your transportation needs are. If you can help me understand that, then I can help you pick out an area that is going to be conducive to that lifestyle that you want to live, okay? You like walking? Do you want to be close to, the grocery store? We can do all that, okay? But just be prepared that reliable transportation is definitely recommended and basically a must-have if you want to get out of the house. Number 3 is that healthcare isn't always super close or super fast, okay? We do have good healthcare, I would say, with the Asante Hospital System. That's Three Rivers Medical Center in Grants Pass, which is a hospital. That's the Rogue Regional Medical Center in Medford, which is a hospital, and there's also one in Ashland. Good care with them, top 15 hospital system in the United States for the last 15 years, if I remember right, or maybe it's the last 10 years. Anyways, very good hospital system. We also have Providence in Medford, which is also a very good hospital from what I understand. But with that, there are some limitations in terms of specialists or some long wait times in smaller towns and those sorts of things, okay? Some appointments for some of those specialists, especially in a non-emergency type of a situation, can be a month or a couple months out even. But for emergency care, it's really pretty available. We'll talk more about that in a second, but have an understanding of how far you are from the hospitals, okay? And that's something that I ask most folks who move here. Is there a proximity that you want to be within the hospital? Do you want to be within 20 minutes, 30 minutes, especially if you're getting up there in age and that's something that's important to you? We can definitely, plan around that. And same thing, with the airport or shopping. If you go to Home Depot multiple times a week, I don't know why I keep saying Home Depot as a reference, but maybe they should, sponsor me or something. I'm not sponsored by Home Depot, just FYI. But there's a lot of other great options too. There's a Lowe's, there's a Diamond Home Improvement, there's a Grange Co-op, there's Tractor Supply, there's all sorts of stores like that. So I could have picked any one of those, but shout out to Home Depot. Anyways, you want to be aware of where those things are in proximity to the neighborhoods that we are looking at. Back onto the medical and the healthcare thing. Telehealth is an option. It does exist, but not really, the greatest solution, I think, in reality for a lot of folks. And something that does surprise people that are moving here from California, especially, is that Southern Oregon does not have a Kaiser hospital. And so if that's something that's super important to you, we just don't have that around here. Again, though, there are solutions, and it starts with planning, right? So just, again, making sure that you understand what your needs are. Do you want to be 10 minutes from the hospital, 30 minutes from the hospital? What is, important to you there? If there's a specific type of specialist that you have to go see the eye doctor so often, multiple times a year or every month, and you don't want to drive long distance to that, we can always utilize that as a hub and figure out where, to go from there. So all those things are just important to know, and that's why planning is very important in this case. And like I said, our emergency care is very good. The Rogue Regional Medical Center is, I believe, a level 3 trauma center and serves, population area of more than 600,000, I think over 700,000 people actually. So a great hospital system there, never an issue to get good emergency care. And so I actually have, unfortunately, a really good real life example of that. And that's when my 18-month-old son just recently put his hand inside the vacuum cleaner, and the wheels in there tore some of his skin off of his hand. And so unfortunately I had to make a trip to the emergency room, but thankfully they were able to get him right in and see him immediately, took care of everything right there, wrapped it up, cleaned it up, did the whole thing. And then they did a virtual meeting with the Children's Burn Center up in Portland, who requested that they see him. So a couple days later, we make a trip up to Portland, they do a skin graft, and now he's on the mend and on the road to recovery. But other than those very, unique specialist type of situations, you're typically not gonna have to leave the Rogue Valley, okay? You're gonna be able to find what you need generally here, and again, without, save for those kind of very special one-off type of situations, like an 18-month-old, little tiny baby hand getting a skin graft, right? You're gonna have to go to Portland for that. So let's put a bow on the medical care and move on to the next one. And that is number 4, which is crime. So crime here is low until it's not, right? So what does that mean, okay? What it means is that property crime is a category here that is one that kind of pushes everything else up. So if you look at just the overall crime rate in Southern Oregon, whether it's Medford or Grants Pass, and you compare it to other places, there's services I've seen online that say that the crime rate is higher here, and that's something that I get asked about a lot. If you dig into that data, what you'll find is that it's pushed up because of property crime. Property crime is things like trespassing or theft. And that's something that was bumped up quite a bit when the homeless issue was more prevalent than it is now. Okay, it's been cleaned up a lot, and I wouldn't be surprised to see the property crime data. It always seems like it runs way behind, but I wouldn't be surprised to see that on the decline as a result of a lot more efforts being put into addressing the homeless situation. So anyways, that is what you're going to see when you dive into the data. That's at least what I've seen, is that property crime is kind of what pushes everything else up. And so it's not violent crime, and I think a lot of folks here are more than happy to have that trade-off. But again, getting to the solution here, then that simply is to research and to verify, right? So if you really like a specific neighborhood, what I always suggest to people is look up the crime data, okay? Look at various different websites. Don't just look at one. Look at multiple, okay? And then walk around the neighborhood, observe it. Do you see, people walking around that you could talk to, right? Somebody out walking their dog and you can talk to them and ask, do they live in the neighborhood? Have they ever experienced any sort of property crime or any other crime? Do they know any of the other neighbors who have? Did they ever get, their car stolen out of their driveway or anything like that, okay? And I know obviously things happen and there's one-off scenarios that exist, but is there a trend, right? Are you talking to every single person and everyone's telling you, yeah, this area sucks, we wish we never would have moved here, our car got stolen 3 times out of our driveway, whatever, right? I don't think you're gonna hear that, right? I've never heard that, and I've lived here over 30 years. So anyways, that is the thing with the crime. It does exist just like everywhere else, but here it has been primarily property crime, and a lot of the data was connected back to when there was a lot more going on with the cannabis industry and a lot of those things happening. So I think we're on the right path there. The trajectory is good, and I think we'll see that as more and more recent data gets released. Number 5 is the weather is gonna be a little bit more extreme than you may think sometimes, okay? What I mean by that is that the wildfire smoke can linger for weeks in the summer, and it can, be detrimental, right? It can. It's not always, but it can, right? And that's the key point to make there. And the same thing with winter fog. Winter fog can be intense, right? And it can also be a non-issue like it was this year. I don't think we had hardly any fog. And last summer, we didn't have hardly any smoke. And this is the thing, if we've talked on the phone or if you call me, I will tell you the same thing, is that it's hit or miss. It's hit or miss on the fog. It's hit or miss on the smoke. It totally depends on the year and what's going on. So there's no real blanket answer, but the reality is that, wildfires do exist. We live in a beautiful area with a lot of great trees, and that's one of the risks that you have in being in one of the environments like this. Solution there is that if those are things that are troublesome to you or that you worry about, we can always look at, avoiding fog by getting into, maybe a higher elevation town that is above the fog line, and you're gonna have clear winter skies, right? Or we could look at some of the different microclimates that are less impacted by fire and fog, right? Or we could adjust your timing of your trip here or showings to where you're gonna see, Southern Oregon in the middle of the summer and maybe in the middle of the winter to get really a good sense of whether this is somewhere that you would like to live. So the next brutally honest truth here, I think, is number 6 now. I've lost count, but we're gonna go with 6. And that is that housing can be expensive and hard to win, okay? And so if you look at, let's say Jacksonville and Ashland in particular, their pricing in those towns is pretty similar to like a mid-tier California. And what we mean by that is it's probably in the, 6 to 7 range for a 3-bed, 2-bath house in fair shape. You can find lower than that, absolutely, and you could find significantly higher than that. So it really just depends on what it is that you're looking for. And that's something that's just important to be aware of, okay? Inventory can be tight. It has not been lately. We've actually have the most amount of homes on the market as of recording this in the middle of May. The most amount of homes on the market we've seen in years. And that's a great thing for buyers because it provides you with opportunities. The caveat there is that those homes could very quickly fly off the market and we could be back into a really, really strong seller's market very easily if mortgage rates were to come down under the 6% range. I think we'll see an absolute buyer's frenzy if that situation occurs, and that could occur and that could just sell out all the inventory very, very quickly. Like we did a few years ago, we had only 300 homes on the market before a population of about 300,000 people, okay? So about 1,500 houses on the market, 1,500 between Jackson and Josephine County right now at the time of recording this video. So just to give you an idea of the difference, but there's inventory out there, there's choices, but it's something that you need to just hear the truth on, is that it can get expensive. There can be bidding wars, especially if you're looking at the things that are the most popular, right? Single family homes that are turnkey, that have, a nice view in a popular neighborhood, that are priced right, that look great. Those fly off the market. Still, even with that many homes on the market, we have it's kind of a little bit of a unique housing market here because we don't have as many of the big, national builders in here just pumping out houses. We have a lot more local builders who are kind of filling in the gaps instead of doing these gigantic rollout developments. And so that causes, not a lot of homes, new build homes, to be hitting the market every single year in comparison to other bigger markets, right? So, if we end up with one of those situations where a lot of buyers flood back into the market, it'd be easy to eat up that inventory, and in the supply side, it's just not enough to be able to offset it in a quick way. But again, the solution here is essentially to help you find overlooked but appreciating towns, if that's what you're looking for, places where you can get a good deal like Talent or Eagle Point or even Rogue River, and be able to tap into our network of off-market options and those sorts of things, right? We've done that for a number of clients, and ultimately to help educate you on the best way to kind of stretch your dollar further and to accomplish the goals that you have for purchasing your home. Next up, number 7, let's say, is that not all schools and services are created equal. And we're gonna lump schools and services together, and that'll make more sense here in a second. But let's talk about school quality, okay? Because it does vary pretty significantly. I know there's folks that will say, I will never send my kid to that school district, and I'll only send them this one. And I've heard that both ways in multiple districts. So it's kind of, again, really comes down to your personal experience or who you're talking to. And I really encourage you, if that's something that's important to you, school quality, to do research, to contact the school districts and to hear, about their scores and to find all that out. And I'm happy to provide some resources on that for you. And then that's one of the solutions that we'll talk about here more in a second. But that's something that is important, right? To ensure that if you have children that you're, looking out for, what school are they going into? What is the reputation there, right? There's good private school options here as well, and that's something that I can share some of those options with you as well. But in terms of the services, some of the small towns lack funding, right? And the funding that, you would expect to get to fund like extracurricular activities. And so instead of the schools having good funding for a marching band or something, maybe the town that you're in right now, you're used to having those types of things, whereas here that may not be common at all schools. The bigger schools are going to have that type of thing, most of them, but smaller schools, not so much. So keep those things in mind, right? If you have maybe one of your children is in like a specialized sport that's not all schools have it, maybe, I don't know, a good example, swimming. Let's say swimming, okay? That's kind of specialized in Southern Oregon. Not every school has a swimming team here in Southern Oregon, okay? So that's something to keep in mind. But otherwise, internet service here is pretty widely available in terms of the high-speed internet. It's never been an issue to find that if you said, I have to have gigabit up, gigabit down, amazing speed to be able to stream and do Zoom meetings and do all this sort of stuff, no problem. We have that all over the place, rural and not, it's very widely available. Trash, water, all that type of stuff, typically not an issue. There's some rural areas where you're gonna maybe get up there in price, things might be a little more expensive and stuff, but again, you're gonna get the trade-off, right? But again, solution here is essentially research and us sharing resources with you. So if you are, again, like there's something that's very important to you about a school program or extracurricular activity or something that community offers or high-speed internet or whatever it is, let me know, okay? And that's something we can help you find and help pinpoint the areas they're gonna provide those things to you so you can live the lifestyle and your family can live the lifestyle that you guys all want to live. So the next truth is that convenience really isn't a Southern Oregon value, okay? There's not a lot of, let's say dining options. I mean, there are from our perspective, but, let's say dining, shopping, entertainment, in comparison to a bigger area, right? If you're from the Bay Area, if you're from Las Vegas or Salt Lake City or Phoenix or somewhere like that, the amount of options of what you're gonna have available to do on any given weekend are going to be significantly more than what you're going to have here, right? The amount of options for going out to dinner, for, oh, do you want to go out to a really nice steakhouse tonight? We could go to this one or this one or this one or this one or this one, right? Here, it's like, you want to go to a really nice steakhouse tonight? We have, well, there's this one, or there's this one, or maybe if we want to go to Ashland, there's this one. Not as many options, right? But that's okay. And like, everybody here's fine with that, right? That's never been a problem. Just something to be aware of is that the convenience there of thinking like, oh, I'm craving sushi or whatever the thing is, and I could just run right down the street and have 5 options. That may not be the case here. So that's something that if you're used to that, you should be aware of that, okay? There are some good places for, walkability, right? If that's convenience to you, is having, the ability to just kind of walk and shop and all that. There's some great towns like that. Ashland, for example, is one of them with the Ashland Plaza. And so those places do exist, but it's not like, if you're all across Southern Oregon, if you're in Medford or Grants Pass, you're gonna have those same level of conveniences. So that's, again, something to keep in mind. National chains, for example, are not all over the place. A lot of folks rely on Amazon and Costco trips. Like I mentioned previously, there, some of the higher end stores, Nordstrom's, for example, Williams-Sonoma, those types of stores, not going to get those here, okay? But you do have other options. You can buy things on Amazon, you can buy things at Costco, you can, do all those, and those are kind of the main places that folks really tend to do a lot of their shopping. So what's the solution there? I mean, obviously I can't bring a Nordstrom's into Southern Oregon, but the reality here is that the solution is to be realistic about your expectations, okay? And it's for me to ensure that you have seen the area, right? That when you come up and you make a visit here and you want to see what Southern Oregon has to offer, it's to help you see all of what it has to offer, to be able to see, hey, what kind of clothes you like to wear. Here's some options for places to buy those, whether it's boutiques or, different stores like the Rogue Valley Mall, right? There's all sorts of things like that once we have a good understanding of the lifestyle, again, that you want to live, we could help recommend, places to check out and those sorts of things. So we could also help recommend towns that have, the best balance between the amenities that you're looking for and the lifestyle that you want to live. So that's all important stuff, and part of the solution is just having a good understanding and having realistic expectations of what life in Southern Oregon could look like for you. Now, as we get towards the end of the list here, the next brutally honest truth is that the politics in the area could make or break your move, okay? And we don't like to really get into, politics a lot here. We do talk about it because this is my job, is to be honest with you. But the reality is that the political culture here in Southern Oregon does vary pretty significantly, even from town to town, right? And that's something that is nice, in my opinion. We have a lot of diversity in Southern Oregon. We have Ashland, which is very progressive, similar to Eugene, Portland, Seattle, Bay Area, Berkeley. A lot of folks that are from the Bay Area have compared Ashland to Berkeley. They say it reminds them of that a lot. And it does in some ways, for sure. But you have that on kind of the left end of the spectrum. And then you have, Grants Pass and a lot of the smaller towns that surround Southern Oregon that are more on the right end of the spectrum and politically. And so what you see there, though, is the overall, it does tend to balance itself out. And I would describe Southern Oregon as not a very overly political area where you're not going to see as many people, protesting in the streets like you would see on the news up in Portland, right? Or places like that. You don't really see, people occupying the parks and stuff like that down here. It's just not as political. And it is a political time in the country, and, just kind of is what it is. But for the most part, it's not something that, tends to define their relationships. People are still neighborly, and that's what seems to be the priority, is like, are you a good neighbor? Are you a good person? And that's something I think is important for people to know coming in here, is that when you go meet somebody, their first question isn't going to be, hey, who'd you vote for? Right? It's going to be, nice to meet you. Tell me, where'd you guys come from? Tell me about your lifestyle. Do you like to golf? Do you like to hunt? Do you like to fish? Whatever it is, right? It's in my experience, that's what it seems to be much more about. But it is important, again, to be aware of that. And the solution here is essentially to just kind of, again, have that good understanding of what it is that you want, right? Do you want to be in a neighborhood that is full of MAGA flags and Trump signs and all that kind of stuff? Or do you want to be in a neighborhood that is nowhere near any of that stuff? Like, it's whatever you want. It's important for us to be able to understand that, and we can help create that for you. We can help suggest areas that are going to most align with, the lifestyle, again, that you want to live. So the more clarity we have, the more, accuracy we can provide you with in terms of an area that's going to fit what you're looking for. And as we wrap this up with our last item, number 10, it is just that the lifestyle is not for everyone, right? But it can be for you, okay? We are definitely a slower paced lifestyle, fewer amenities, there's tight-knit towns, and I know that that's just not the thing for everyone, right? If you're used to being in, a big city where you walk by everybody and nobody knows who you are and you like it that way, that's probably not what Southern Oregon is going to provide for you. We're an area where if you go into the grocery store and you've been here for a while, you're bound to see somebody strike up a conversation with them, chat with them for a little while, check on their, how the kid's doing, how's the family, that kind of thing. And it's awesome, and we love it that way. But it's important, again, to be aware of those things coming in. If that's something that's important to you and you look forward to that, great, you'll love it. If it's something that, scares you to death, you don't want people knowing your business, then maybe it's not going to be the spot for you, because people will probably know your business, especially if you are involved in the community and you live in one of the smaller towns, which is kind of the way it is. And that's kind of just the reality, right? So that isolation and quiet and simplicity can be a dream for some, and it can be, a challenge for others, right? Some people absolutely love, the land and the freedom, and other people miss the buzz of the city, right? It's very different, and people are different, and that's all great. But unfortunately, there's some people who romanticize that rural lifestyle, and then they get into it and they're like, oh my gosh, like I'm so isolated, I don't know anybody, and they hate it, right? And that can happen too. So the solution here is, again, to really just help you test drive the area and experience lifestyle before you commit to it and make a move here. So what we could do there is just kind of have more conversations, right? And that's what this all kind of comes back to, is just having conversations to understand your situation, understand your needs and wants, understand the lifestyle that you want to live, the values and things that are important to you, and then we can help you find that here in Southern Oregon.
My husband and I are native Californians. I hate to say it, but I don't miss California all that much.
We were very surprised, because where we come from, you don't really talk about that unless you're in small groups.
So it was kind of a combination of things, the retirement and then just a change of pace and all of those, right? From understanding, right?
Absolutely, absolutely.
How did you start evaluating areas? How did you come to discover Southern Oregon?
We had two states that we were looking closely at, one being Tennessee and the other being Oregon.
So again, Southern Oregon has absolutely real beauty, real freedom, real opportunity, but it is definitely not a one-size-fits-all lifestyle. And if you don't do your homework, you could end up in the wrong town with the wrong vibe or the wrong pace of life. And so whether you're relocating for, retirement or remote work or to raise your family, the hardest part is just knowing what actually fits you. And especially if you're several hundred miles away from Southern Oregon right now, okay? And that's where I come in. I don't just help people buy homes. I help you figure out which towns match your personality, match the lifestyle that you want to live, match your values and your priorities, okay? And which ones to avoid, okay? And I've walked dozens of clients through this exact process. So if you're serious about making a move to Southern Oregon and you want to avoid some of those costly surprises, call me, text me, email me. My phone number is on the screen right here, right now. It's also in the description of this video. And there's also a relocation guide that you can download if you'd rather do that, if you're not quite ready to have a conversation. But either way, we'd be more than happy to walk you through all those things, to hear your goals and to find out what we can do to best work together, okay? And if you're still trying to narrow down where to live, I suggest you check out this next video over here. It'll help narrow it down, make a big shortcut for you. So thank you for watching this video. I'll see you on the next one.